On this edition of the Table of Content, Michael and I continue our journey through MisSpelled, the new fantasy series from We Are One Body Audio Theatre, and we'll dive into episode 3 that's coming up next right here on the Table of Content. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in to this episode of the Table of Content. I am Albert Saenz, joined with Michael Steele. Michael, glad to have you.
Oh, great to be here.
So we continue through our journey, our own quest of reviewing MisSpelled, and we look now into episode 3, entitled Love and Enchantment. So for all you romantics out there, maybe this is the episode that will speak to you in more ways than one. But Michael, I'll hand it off to you to kind of open it up for us.
Sure. Well, thank you, Albert. It's when this episode was Love and Enchantment, I just wanted to say,
Where are the harps?
Yeah, where are the harps?
Where's Cupid?
Right, exactly. So to pick up from the previous episode, the mage, kind of a cantankerous person who is suffering from severe memory loss, and he's looking to find out who he is, had a lead from a dog that he gave speech to, and the dog pointed him in the right direction. He said, "Why don't you go over to a village in that direction?" And as he's walking to find answers about who he is, he comes, actually he's struck in the hat by an arrow. So
it's always a little dangerous when you're walking down a path and just an arrow comes flying out of nowhere and hits you in the head, well, in his hat.
Right. I wonder if that's a little nod to Cupid. There's our Cupid arrow right there. Just goes right through his hat.
Maybe.
But so, right. How's that for starting your morning off well, having an arrow sort of hit your hat. So, but anyways, so he stumbles upon this gentleman, Sebastian, and they talk a little bit. Sebastian, once he finds out that the mage can do magic, asks him to make his local crush fall in love with him, and asks if the mage could help him out with that. And the mage, as we've come to expect, kind of crankily says no. So, and for a lot of good reasons, but he says, I can't make people fall in love with you. It just doesn't work like that. But then he asks a little bit about her name, and what's her name? And her name's Josie, and she's pretty, and she's got long black hair and a voice like an angel.
And we've already repeated this a couple of times about the mage, but we continue to find that, as you said, he continues to be cantankerous. He continues to sort of be unwilling to assist outside of his own, well, selfishness. He's still just focused on himself. Now, I don't want to displace the fact that someone who woke up in the middle of the forest with no memory and can do magic is like, what happened to me? That they're kind of focused on one particular thing. I want to give them credit for, yeah, you want to find out who you are, what happened, where you came from. However, I just kind of hope, I have faith in humanity that, there would be a bit more charity and kindness to people around you, especially if you're trying to get people to help you. If you want some answers, if you give a little, you get a little, that type thing, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. But
Right.
he really holds on, his character development, we are really just sort of, I think what it's good is we almost start to get really frustrated with the mage as we continue through the series.
Yes.
As the listeners, as the audience, we're like, gosh, come on,
Right.
like you have an opportunity here to do something, and you just kind of continue to either mess things up, you continue to sort of create problems, even if there's
Yes.
resolution, even if there was resolution in the mayors and the townspeople and the animals from the previous episode, even if that's the case, you still sort of just like you're ruffling a lot of feathers here. Like
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
not why not try a different path? Instead of sour, why not try sweet and see how far that gets you?
Right. There, as you were talking, I was just coming to mind this saying, sow an action, reap a habit, sow a habit, reap a character, sow a character, reap a destiny. And I think we're kind of seeing that his character is coming out. He's sown something that of which he's bearing the fruit in his own person. And it's not always kind of a nice thing to look at. He's just kind of, yeah, grouchy all the time and selfish. Right? And it's not like he's even aware of it at times. I think he's in need of a reawakening on a lot of different levels. So he's there and he's asking, or he's dealing with this young man, Sebastian, and like you were saying, he's focused on his own goals, his own purpose, his own desires. So he just doesn't want to get involved with this young couple and their affection for each other. And it's sort of the classic love story where it's like they both have affections for each other, and yet they haven't broached this topic, kind of bring that desire or element out in the open through good old fashioned communication, right? He wants to turn to magic and she wants to turn to magic conversely.
Sure, sure. Well, sometimes immaturity leads to drastic actions, drastic desires. You're willing to sort of do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting point of the story, right? Because what do we have to compare to? We have the mage who has something that he wants very much,
Right.
and he seems to be willing to do whatever it takes to a certain extent, only if it helps him, of course.
Yep.
Well, I'll make all the animals talk, as we saw in episode 2.
Yep.
And it sort of has led him on a path because the dog sort of said, hey, go find the witch in the forest on the chicken leg house.
Mm.
And now we are, confronted with these two young people, and we're going to meet Josie here in a quick second. But these two young people who are in love with each other, and they're finally at the point where they're like, well, I'll do whatever it takes. And again, we have this point of, did you consider what's going to happen
Right.
from the thing that you want done? Or are you
Right.
more concerned with just yourself, right? Because I don't think the mage really concerned himself with, well, what's going to happen when I make all the animals talk?
Nope.
So we have Sebastian, and we're introduced to Josie. So let me bring her into the story, right? So Josie is talking to the cat, the sort of Puss in Boots character, and she's going on and on about Sebastian, and the cat's sort of like humoring her, and then the
Yeah.
mage comes in and says, "Oh, mage, good to see you," and "Oh, it's you," and this and that. And they have their conversation. Then Josie sort of starts saying, after the cat and the mage have their conversation, Josie's saying, "Oh, and so you're the mage, and I'd like to make a wish." He's like, he said, "I'm not a genie." He
Right.
says, "Well, I just want you to help me fall in love with, I want to fall in love with this other guy, Sebastian." He's like,
Yes.
"No, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this." But the consequences are not being considered, right? The
Right.
consequences are not being considered because eventually, sort of, the mage caves in, right? And says, "Look, tell you what I'll
Yeah.
do. Here's here's a flower. It's enchanted now. Give it to Sebastian. Make sure he takes a big whiff of the flower and
Hmm.
see what happens. And at least he'll sort of be at your beck and call, right?" But he's very clear, right, about, I can't make anyone fall in love. I can't sort of force your will in that area.
Right.
So Josie goes off to go and find Sebastian and give him the flower. The cat and the mage have a bigger conversation. And then Josie returns, and Sebastian is basically just like enthralled and won't leave her alone and is trying so much to impress her. And Josie says, "Mage, I asked you to make a man love me. not to make him turn into a fool. And,
Right.
and Sebastian just continues on his ways, and he's just so eloquent. And the mage says, "It's your own fault. You made a stupid request. You didn't ask for love. You settled for enchantment. I can give you
That's right.
enchantment. I could make him desire you." And, so the consequences are coming out, right, from the
Yeah.
actions. And,
Right.
the cat sort of intervenes and says, "Mage, look at them. This is really pathetic, So fine, fine."
Mhm.
He releases Sebastian from his enchantment, and they both find out that they both wanted the other one to cast a spell on the other one, and they're both sort of caught off guard by that. And, basically the mage
Mhm.
says, "Y'all should just try to get to know each other
Right.
and, do it that way, because there were consequences to the actions, but they didn't think about that." And
Right.
I would have hoped that this would have been a place for the mage to sort of realize, you know, there are consequences to your actions. But unfortunately, the mage doesn't quite learn his lesson yet. But at least we learn as the audience from Josie and Sebastian and their interactions. We learn, hey, you should really think about what you do before you do it.
Right. Right. Exactly. And the story brings that out, the consequences of just sort of the focusing only on desire versus actual love as an interpersonal relationship of seeking the good of the other, right? And like Josie just is kind of disgusted with this sort of foolish, just mindless devotion to her, and that's not really what I think a relationship is meant to be. It's supposed to be like that respectful, mutual. I cherish you, and I'm going to try to do everything that I can to help you flourish. And when both are working on that sort of platform, then relationships grow into a really beautiful thing. But if it's kind of lopsided through enchantment, right, then yeah, it just kind of portrays how it just doesn't work. I also like as well, like there's that little brief dialogue with the cat as well, and the cat's like, "Wait, mage, don't go. Why? Well, because Puss in Boots was going to paint a landscape, but then no, I want to make you. I want to paint you." And the mage again doesn't have time for that.
But he does sort of settle, right? Again,
Oh, true. Yes.
very small instance of like, well, okay,
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh,
Yep.
all right, but only because I need a break from walking all day."
Hmm. And isn't that interesting? And that's where he has the conversation with the cat and is introduced to the fact that there's this local dragon terrorizing the nearby villages, just ravaging things, right? That's kind of interesting. I think you see that trail or thread in fairy tales a lot as well, where this seemingly unimportant action, like you were saying, he settles as seemingly unimportant, has unintended consequences. I think maybe that's the flip side of the mage just going around and acting without thinking about the consequences. I think in fairy tales, we're always sort of confronted with that. A seemingly small action has amazing or grave consequences,
Oh,
for good
sure.
or
No,
for
I think you
ill.
see that a
Yeah.
lot. I think you see a lot. I mean, in Snow White, right? One bite of an apple, it sends her into this massive sleep that she cannot wake from.
Mhm.
Alice in Wonderland, a single bite from, at least in the Disney version. I would suggest that people understand
Right.
the actual novel versions of some of these stories are actually a little bit darker and more complex than what Disney led us on to believe. That being said,
Yes.
Alice in Wonderland, she takes one bite from a piece of cake and it changes her. We see how the prick of a finger, affects someone. So you see, like you
Right.
said, a small action can have big consequences. Now, I listed off a lot of negative things that happen, but a
Mm. Mhm.
small action can also be to the positive, and we may not
Mhm.
see it at first, but it could lead to bigger, better, grander things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think of a fairy tale in which that happens as well, where there's a small kindness done and it has unintended fantastic consequences later on. Yeah, or maybe like Jack and the Beanstalk would be a good example of that. Jack is totally sold on the reality of these magic beans, and he gives the cow away, and he's scolded by his mom. But then that opens up opportunities for him to have an adventure and to get a goose that lays a golden egg and lots of gold and a harp, etc., etc.
Well, then I
But
think where we come to here is we've come to really finishing off with the cat and the mage, because
mm,
in their earlier conversation, because I wanted to focus on Josie and Sebastian, in the earlier conversation, the mage finds out from the cat that there's a dragon in the valley,
mm,
and he becomes very interested. He's like, a dragon, well, tell me more about the dragon. And the mage is like, is anyone dealing with the dragon? And cat says, well, the king's council, they're going to come together, discuss what action's appropriate. And the mage's like, well, I don't really do king's councils. And the cat tries to sort of bolster the mage's sort of confidence. He says, it seems to me that a mage of your caliber would be able to overpower such a beast with minimal effort. And the mage is
mm,
like, well, maybe, but I do have something else that's more important. And he's, well, your quest. And he's like, yeah, I got to get on with my quest. And then they come to sort of the ending scene, because we already talked about it, but Josie and Sebastian come back together. The maid releases the enchantment, and they go off on their merry way. And the cat
mm,
sort of praises the mage. You've done a good thing.
yeah.
You've done a good thing. His exact words, I think, are, "You. I knew you were a benevolent mage at heart." And I think that
Mm,
point of what is in the heart, right? What is really in the heart? Because I think sometimes we get kind of caught up in the surface level of character flaws. And we're like, oh man, because really we are led to believe that the mage is just kind of grumpy, selfish, cantankerous, and he is. But
yeah.
what's going on inside of his heart, and then the cat gives us a good cue for the interior of the mage's heart has something going on inside of it that's
Hmm.
good at that center point. So I like that the cat sort of is trying to basically be positive to the mage.
Hmm. Right. Encouraging, trying to focus on what's good, and kind of turning a blind eye to the fact that he's grumpy and kind of self-absorbed.
And then we have the sort of finale between the mage and the cat. And the cat, as we know, was working on this painting, and he says, okay, I'm done, because the mage
Hmm.
is getting impatient, like he should be. And he comes around and he says, well, who's that person, who's that with me? It's like, oh, I don't know, a companion, a friend, and uh, he says, an apprentice or an assistant.
Right.
And then the mage is like, an apprentice?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems right.
That
The cat's
seems
sort of
right.
like, well, I didn't mean anything by it. I was just making a painting. And the mage is like, oh, that strikes a chord. And so the mage, who doesn't expect anyone to be able to really help him as much as he wants help, he says to the cat, I think you've helped me after all. The cat says a wonderful, wonderful line. He says, don't sound so surprised. Everybody's capable of helping others, even you, mage.
Mm,
And then, he finishes up, he goes on his way, and the mage continues on his quest. But I think that's a great way to sort of end that episode, because we're now at the end of episode 3. We're almost kind of halfway through this, series of 7 episodes. And now we've ended on this note of everybody can help.
mm, mhm.
Everybody can help. A cat who's in boots making a painting who can talk, a mage who's a bit cantankerous, he can help. Everybody can help. And I think that's a very just good nod for everyone, for the audience to really soak that line in. Everybody can help. Doesn't
That's
matter
right.
who you are.
Right. Do good where you're planted. Right. And I think we also see that, like you were saying, in the mage now, it's become with that word of encouragement from the cat that the mage has been doing good, but up until now, it's been not intentional. It's been reluctant. It's been with a lot of griping. And so maybe this, again, will sort of mark a turning point for the mage's own uh, sort of journey as well. Like you were saying, there are good things that are happening inside of the mage, and that kind of sets us up for the next episode.
Yeah, that's gonna take us into episode 4. We continue to follow the mage on his quest, on his journey. We get to see where he is, and again, I'm not doing spoilers, but we get to sort of encounter another classic fairy tale, sort of reimagined to a certain extent, another entertaining scene, and some other characters pulled in from other stories. So a good episode in episode 4 coming up, and I'm excited to have all of you as the audience listen, and I'll be excited to talk with Michael, looking back at episode 4, and then we will continue on from there, 5, 6, and 7. So with that, Michael, I want to thank you. Always a pleasure to have you on board for the Table of Content.
Oh, likewise, Albert. It's always a joy to be here, and I'm looking forward to future episodes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you have enjoyed this episode of the Table of Content. We continue to provide these Table of Contents as a way to open up this story, this MisSpelled series by WAOB Audio Theatre. I hope that you will continue to listen to the series and continue to follow along on these special editions of the Table of Content, if you will. And until the next time, as always, be good, stay safe, peace.